Hello, everyone, and welcome to another module of Back to Basics. This week, we're going to talk about intermittent fasting, and we're going to talk about what it is, why it works, and we will use the acronym IF for intermittent fasting. We're going to talk a little bit about the benefits of intermittent fasting, how to do it safely, and then set goals and expectations for week 4. So, what is intermittent fasting? I'm sure a lot of you have heard about it online. Maybe have seen a YouTube video or two talking about intermittent fasting. So, we're going to come at it from a very scientific perspective and medical perspective. So, whatever you've heard about it, I want you to put that aside and we're going to get into some more scientific definitions of what intermittent fasting is and how to do it safely. So, first off, intermittent fasting is a voluntary abstaining from food for a specified period of time. We're going to talk about how long we should do that. And then between these episodes of fasting, food is eaten to satiety. So it's not a low calorie way of eating. We're simply abstaining from food under certain conditions. And then once that time frame is over, we're going back to eating how we're used to eating. Further defining it through the website Diet Doctor, intermittent fasting is all about eating what your body needs, and we're simply giving it a little bit of a rest from constant feeding. And you're going to find out there are all kinds of good things that happen in the body when we give it a rest from feeding. So again, it is not about starving yourself. It's not about calorie restriction or counting. It's about taking a brief period to stop eating and allow your body to heal up. So why do we want to intermittent fast? Well, that gets us to the topic of autophagy. Autophagy is a very cool mechanism in the body that we're born with. And what it does is that when we stop eating or withhold food from the body, it springs into action. So I kind of think of it as renovating your house. So we don't need, like if we're going to renovate our kitchen, we don't need to, what I call, throw the baby out with the bathwater. We look at our kitchen, there may be some things that are in good shape that we want to keep, and then there are other things that need some repair, or we simply completely want to remove, like a broken cabinet door that's no longer functional. So this is kind of what happens in the body. During autophagy, the body is simply doing some renovation. So the body looks for old, outdated, and worn out parts and replaces them with some fresh, new, and snazzy parts. There's something called growth hormone in the body, which becomes elevated during fasting and supports this process. So basically, autophagy allows for regeneration and renewal of cellular structures, organelles, and tissues. Again, this growth hormone is key because this is what we call our refresher hormone, or in other words, our anti-aging hormone. There's also something called mTOR, lowercase m, uppercase T or OR, which is elevated when we are constantly eating, especially a high carb diet. So a period of abstaining from food allows mTOR to be quieted or suppressed. And when this happens, this true renovation, regeneration, renewal of cellular structures can kick into action. So autophagy is a highly regulated internal process. We certainly wouldn't want this to get out of control. There are checks and balances in the body that keep our body from totally cleaning out the entire house, should we say. So, autophagy again only takes place in a fasted state. Nutrient deprivation is a key activator of autophagy. Even a calorie restricted diet or dieting in general will not allow, it's not enough to allow autophagy to take place. So there has to be a total abstinence from food in order for it to kick into action. So there is balance here, of course. You can get sick if you fast for too long or too often, or even with no fasting at all if your body gets all gunked up, or too little fasting. So this gets us back to the natural cycle of life. We feast and we fast. We're not constantly dieting. This allows for cell growth during eating, and then by giving ourselves a break from food, it allows the body to clean house. So, additional benefits to fasting. Well, certainly weight loss, and that's a very popular reason that people will start a fasting program. And we even recommend it as a way to jumpstart weight loss during a plateau. So, you may have been dieting and experiencing a nice weight loss of 1 to 2 pounds a week. And you get to a certain point, and all of a sudden the weight loss stops, and you're not really doing anything different. So it could be that your body lowered its body weight set point, and then it's kind of hanging out there. So we want to be able to do something to jumpstart and create further weight loss and lower that body weight set point a little more, maybe to what's more in alignment where where you should be, where your body weight should be for your height and bone size. So fasting, intermittent fasting, can give us that little jump start. Also, it supports a regulation of metabolic hormones, specifically glucose and insulin. And in that, it will actually increase insulin sensitivity and decrease insulin resistance. So if you've been told you're pre-diabetic, uh, intermittent fasting might be a really, really nice thing for you to do in support of moving you from that pre-diabetic phase and into a normal blood glucose and insulin range. Many people notice an increase of mental clarity and focus while they're fasting and after. So again, we're cleaning house. We're cleaning up all the junk that's been hanging around because we freed the body's energy up to do that. So now the body can go around, look for debris, look for junk, clean it up, get rid of it, spruce up these cellular structures and organelles inside the cell, and that results in better mental clarity and focus. Also, if you are an athlete or weekend warrior, intermittent fasting may be beneficial to do on training days. Again, growth hormone is high when you're in a fasted state. Growth hormone will enable the body to build muscle quicker and also recover faster. Now, this all depends on how you feel. I don't recommend it for everyone. Some people absolutely need to have a little something before they train. So if you want to experiment with fasting before a workout, just be cognizant of anything you may be feeling, like slight dizziness or fatigue, and maybe it's not for you, or maybe metabolically you're just not ready to do this. And it could be something that when your metabolism is in a more balanced state, you can try again, certainly. So who is a candidate for intermittent fasting? Well, let's talk about who should not fast first. So if you're pregnant or lactating, definitely it's not the time for intermittent fasting. Children and teenagers, because they are going through extreme growth phases, they really need the nutrients in their bodies on a continuous basis. So intermittent fasting is not for these specific age groups. If you have a medical condition, you must seek practitioner approval, as well as if you're on medications, you must get approval from your practitioner to do a variation of intermittent fasting. If you have diabetes and are on medication, you must discuss this with your practitioner. Fasting while on diabetic medications can actually result and an episode of hypoglycemia. So, your risk for that must be discussed with your practitioner. And then, if you do get the approval or the go ahead, then your blood glucose must be highly monitored during the fasting phase. If you are a food or sugar addict, not the time to fast. It can actually increase cravings in someone who's addicted to food and or sugar. And what we want to do is address the addictive behavior and the physiological addiction first, and then move into intermittent fasting. Also, if you're going through a period of stress, extreme stress, or sleep deprivation, again, fasting is not recommended. Address the stress, address the sleep issues, get those worked out, and then would be the appropriate time to experiment with intermittent fasting. So these rules are pretty hard and fast. If you fall into any of these categories, intermittent fasting is not for you at this particular point in time. So let's talk about different intermittent fasting protocols, okay? These have been studied, the body has been studied during these time frames, so we've got pretty good data that these time frames can be effective for activating the process of autophagy in the body. So we want to experiment with 12 to 16 hour fasts initially. And 12 hours would be the low end, and that's what I would recommend most people start with, and then gradually work their way up to 16 hours, which has been identified as the ideal time frame. So here's how one could potentially do it. You could stop eating at 6 p.m., so maybe have your dinner at 5 p.m., or you could choose any other time, but I'm using this in our example. So stop eating at 6 p.m. and then break your fast the next morning at 6 a.m. This will put you into a 12-hour window, and it's pretty easy to do because the majority of the fasting occurs while you are asleep. The other way you could do this, or once you experience a 12-hour fast and everything feels okay, then you can up it to a 14-hour fast. Again, stop eating at 6 p.m., break your fast the next morning at 8 a.m., gives you 14 solid hours of fasting. And at 14 hours, autophagy is felt to be initiated, but that's probably the minimum. So you may not see it at 12 hours. Definitely, there's like a 14 to 16 hour window where autophagy does kick into action. So once you experiment with 14 hours and that goes well for you, then it's time to try a 16-hour fast. Now, a 16-hour fast, you may see it written as a 16-8 fast. That just means you're fasting for 16 hours. The remainder of that time frame, 8 hours, is your eating window in a 24-hour period. So again, with a 16-hour fast, using the same example, you would stop eating at 6 p.m., and then break your fast the next day at 10 a.m., and you have accomplished a 16-hour fast, which is most desirable. Now, how many times a week should a person fast if you are in that IF mode? 2 to 3 times a week is ample. So maybe you could do it on a Tuesday, Thursday, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's up to you and what works best with your schedule. So 2 to 3 times a week is desirable, and 16 hours is optimal. But I would recommend starting 12 hours, maybe once a week the first time, and then moving into 14 hours once you master that. 16 hours, once you master 16 hours, then you could choose to do it twice a week. If that feels good in your body, choose to do it then 3 times a week. 16 hours, 3 times a week, you definitely will move the needle on that body weight set point. You should start reaping some of the benefits we talked about on the previous slide. But for some people, depending where their metabolic starting point is, it may take a little longer. So maybe one person will reap benefits after their initial week of fasting 3 times a week for 16 hours. And then another person, it may take 4 to 6 weeks to really start seeing the benefits and moving the needle on that scale if that's the desired intention. So you have to be patient with this process and give it a little time. It all depends where you started from. If you were pre-diabetic, if you had a serious amount of weight to lose, then definitely it may take you a little longer to reach your goals, and you must be patient and allow for this. But be confident that autophagy is taking place and the body is using this time of fasting to heal, to renovate, refresh, spruce up, all the things we talked about. So, what can we have during a fast? Fasting doesn't mean that you go without anything or any liquids. Definitely, we want to keep very hydrated. So, water is a must during fasting. You have to remember to properly hydrate the body, and I would hydrate going in to that fasting period. So, if I know on a Monday I'm going to start my fast Monday night, I would definitely be more focused on getting my minimal water requirement, and I would probably go about to maybe 20% over that too, just to ensure that I'm fully hydrated. And what we recommend for water intake is 1/2 your body weight in fluid ounces. So if you weigh 150 pounds, you want to take in a minimum of 75 fluid ounces in water per day. If you up that, 20% would be 15 additional ounces. So then you're looking at 90 ounces of water going into a fasting period. And during fasting, we want to continue that water intake. Now, you can have bone broth with sea salt during a fasting period. Bone broth will not affect our glucose, blood glucose, or insulin. Sea salt is very desirable to take in during a fasting period also. You may be throwing off a little bit of sodium during a fast as part of the cleaning out, sprucing up process. So taking in additional sea salt is always a good idea unless you have been given sodium restrictions by your practitioner, and then again, you have a medical condition and should be working with a practitioner on any fasting that you might attempt. Coffee or tea is fine, black coffee or tea. We do allow a very small amount of cream. Milk products, milk in itself is insulinemic. So that means that dairy will actually increase insulin, but a small amount should not affect insulin levels. So a very small amount of cream if you cannot simply tolerate black coffee or tea. Absolutely no sugar. And all natural sweetener should be okay, like stevia. We know stevia does not affect blood glucose, so a very small amount of cream and stevia should be okay. It will not break your fast. Definitely medium chain triglycerides, MCT, or coconut oil is fine on a fast. That will not break it. So ultimately, you want to think 0 calories, because once we start taking in a fair amount of calories, we are increasing our blood glucose, increasing insulin, and we have broken our fast and we are no longer in a fasted state. So another way intermittent fasting can be done is with an eating window. So some people prefer this technique, and eating windows can generally be 4 to 6 hours. So you would choose a time throughout the day for all of your eating to take place. For example, a 4-hour eating window. Maybe you're going to eat between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. or noon and 4 p.m. And in doing so, you will actually be doing a 20-hour fast. So this is not for everyone. If it doesn't work with your schedule, you just feel you can't do it, then don't do it. Do overnight fasting. But for some people, this is another way that works very well for them. 6-hour eating window, again, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. is when all of your eating would take place. So maybe you would have 3 smaller meals between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. or two meals between 10 a.m. 4 p.m. You would stop eating at that point. And why do I say an 8-hour fast? That's actually an 18-hour fast. Add a 1 before the 8. That's an 18-hour fast. A lot find that alternating eating windows with overnight fasts works for them. Again, I should mention that when you initially attempt intermittent fasting, you may find some of those emotional, psychological cravings exist. Eventually, this dissipates, and especially if you're eating a lower carb, higher fat diet, you shouldn't experience any cravings. And the cravings you do may be rooted in psychological or um, behavior behavioral patterns. But that does dissipate, and fasting gets easier the more you do it, the more you get used to doing it. So one comment on intermittent fasting, if you feel unwell, stop. Okay? If you don't feel well, if you feel nauseous, if you feel dizzy, lightheaded, fatigued, certainly if you feel like you're going to pass out, stop. Stop it. It may not be for you, okay? Or you may have to wait a while and see how you progress on any health program you're currently participating in and try it at another time down the road. So definitely if you feel unwell, you want to stop or maybe reduce the duration of the fast. If you ramped up too quickly, your body simply may not have been ready for it. So that's why I recommend just starting slowly with a 12-hour fast overnight and seeing how that works for you, which can be difficult for some people. A lot of people eat dinner and then maybe 8 o'clock at night sit down and have a snack while they're watching a show or reading a book. So just eliminating that evening snack can be tough for some, and that can be a true challenge with a 12-hour fast when getting started. So if you'd like more information on fasting, I highly recommend you investigate Dr. Jason Fung's writings. Dr. Jason Fung is actually a trained nephrologist, medical doctor, and he has done a lot of research and written a lot about intermittent fasting. He uses it in his clinic with his patients who have various medical conditions. So I feel like he's a pretty knowledgeable, authoritative source and expert in the field of intermittent fasting. I recommend the website dietdoctor.com. This website is run by medical doctors and has very good, solid, scientifically, clinically backed information, as well as a YouTube channel called Low Carb Down Under out of, I believe, Australia, New Zealand. Lots of MDs, PhDs on this channel, and you could simply do a search on intermittent fasting. And if you prefer to watch videos, there's plenty of videos on this topic for you there. So that's it in a nutshell, intermittent fasting. And for your week 4 goals, what we'd like you to do is pick one of the intermittent fasting protocols and a date to implement your own fasting experience. So I would recommend, if you've never fasted before, to start with the 12-hour overnight fast. So simply stop eating at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. and then pick it up again, or break your fast the next morning at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., depending what gets you to 12 hours. So do this one first if you've never fasted before. If you have fasted, you could explore some of the longer term fasting protocols of 14-hour or 16 hours, 16-8 as they say. And then I would do those first before I experimented with an eating window. This just makes sense to me to ramp up slowly. So we want you to pick the protocol, pick a date, and do this at least one time over the next week. And then go to Healthy and journal your experience. So you could take a selfie if you like photos, or you could simply jot a note in your journal, and we will be able to read this. This will only be shared with us, the admin. No one else can see it, and we just love to see what your experience was. Definitely message us with challenges and questions, or if any of this information was confusing, or if you have extenuating circumstances, we can create a workaround for you so you can still experience intermittent fasting. And then be sure to check out our week 4 recipe guide. It is available now. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback from our weekly recipe guides, a lot of meal favorites. So we'd like to hear more. Let us know what your favorite meals are today, what your go-tos are. And we also take requests. So if there's something you don't see in there that you'd like to see, please let us know. Or if you have a favorite food and you would like us to modify it, we're pretty good at modifying and maintaining the deliciousness of the meal. So please let us know. Thank you for your time today, and we look forward to hearing your feedback and seeing you next time. Thank you.